The history of Australia is a complex and diverse one, spanning thousands of years. It begins with the arrival of indigenous Australians who have inhabited the continent for at least 6,500 years. These indigenous peoples had developed rich cultures, languages, and traditions long before Europeans. The first recorded European contact with Australia was made by Dutch explorers in the early 17th century, but it was not until the late 18th century that European colonization began. In 1770, British explorer Captain James Cook claimed the eastern part of the continent for Britain, naming it New South Wales. In 1788, the first fleet, led by Captain Arthur Phillip, arrived in Botany Bay and established a penal colony at Sydney Cove. This marked the beginning of British settlement in Australia, primarily as a place to send convicts from overcrowded prisons in Britain. The colony grew slowly, with free settlers arriving in increasing numbers. Throughout the 19th century, more colonies were established across the continent, including Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, and Tasmania. These colonies experienced rapid growth, fueled by the discovery of gold and the development of agriculture. In 1901, the separate colonies agreed to federate and form the Commonwealth of Australia, becoming a self-governing nation within the British Empire. This marked the start of the modern nation of Australia. Australia's involvement in World War I and World War II had a significant impact on the country. It led to a sense of national identity and independence, as well as the introduction of social reforms and the expansion of the economy. In the post-war period, Australia experienced a wave of immigration, particularly from European countries, which contributed to the country's multicultural society. Indigenous Australians also fought for recognition and rights, leading to significant changes in government policies and attitudes towards Indigenous peoples. Australia has continued to evolve and develop as a nation in the 20th and 21st centuries. It has become a prosperous and multicultural country with a strong economy and a high standard of living. However, it also faces ongoing challenges such as reconciliation with Indigenous Australians, environmental issues, and debates over immigration and national identity. Overall, the history of Australia is a complex tapestry of Indigenous cultures, European colonization, immigration, social change, and economic development. It is a history that continues to shape the nation and its people today. The history of the Australian people is a diverse and multifaceted one, shaped by the interactions between Indigenous Australians, European settlers, and immigrants from around the world. Indigenous Australians, also known as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, have inhabited the continent for at least 6,500 years. They developed rich cultures, languages, and traditions, with hundreds of distinct tribal groups across the continent. Indigenous Australians lived in harmony with the land, practicing hunting, gathering, and agriculture. The arrival of European settlers in the late 18th century had a profound impact on the Indigenous population. The British colonization of Australia began in 1788. With the establishment of a penal colony in Sydney, the settlers brought with them their own culture, language, and institutions, which clashed with and often marginalized the Indigenous peoples. This led to the displacement, dispossession, and mistreatment of Indigenous Australians, as well as the loss of their traditional lands and way of life. In the 19th century, Australia experienced a gold rush, attracting immigrants from around the world. Chinese, Irish, Scottish, and other European settlers arrived in large numbers, seeking economic opportunities. This diverse influx of people contributed to the multicultural fabric of Australian society. The Australian colonies gradually gained self-governance and began to develop their own political, social, and economic systems. The colonies enacted policies such as the White Australia policy, which aimed to restrict non-European immigration and maintain a predominantly European population. Australia's involvement in World War I and World War II had a significant impact on the nation and its people. The wars brought about social and economic changes, as well as a sense of national identity and independence. The post-war period, Australia experienced a wave of immigration, particularly from Southern Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. This immigration significantly contributed to the multicultural makeup of Australian society, enriching its cultural diversity. The struggle for Indigenous rights and recognition gained momentum in the latter half of the 20th century. Efforts to address past injustices and improve the lives of Indigenous Australians led to the establishment of the National Sorry Day and the landmark Mabo decision, which recognized native tit rights. Today, Australia is a vibrant and multicultural nation with a population that reflects its diverse history. It is home to people from all over the world, with over 200 different languages spoken. The Australian people continue to navigate issues of reconciliation, social justice, immigration, and cultural diversity as they shape the future of their nation.